Hello, everyone, and welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness. This is Cherie Burton, and this is a podcast for women who long to feel, express, and be who they truly are. I have been thinking this week the absolute necessity of just coming back into center and grounding and connecting and going within and all of that good stuff. Just had a lot happening. A lot of things I'm attracting, a lot of new experiences and opportunities and people and new ways of thinking, being, and doing. And so actually, this podcast is quite therapeutic for me because it seems uncanny that whatever is happening in my life, there's some parallel with an upcoming episode. So I don't know how the universe mapped that out for me, but maybe you can relate. I feel like these topics are super timely. And a lot of times these guests approach me and want to be on my show. And so I really trust the process now. I'm excited to welcome Claudia Prada. She's a holistic life coach and energy worker for 10 years. And she is trained in Mesoamerican traditional medicine, helping people feel held with heart medicine is what she called it. There's so much power. I mean, there's a loneliness, right? And a lot of us have felt that at various junctures in our lives. And maybe you're feeling it now intensely, but you can feel lonely when you have a lot of loved ones around you and you have a lot of things happening. You just experience your own sense of feeling separate. So we're going to talk today about helping to attune to your inner wisdom and just raise your vibration. Claudia, I'm so grateful that you're joining us today. And I think this topic is going to resonate with a lot of our listeners.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. And also just really thankful to be able to connect with you and to just share together. That feels just really good on my end. It feels very aligned. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. I think your background is so fascinating. Mesoamerican traditional medicine. Do you want to just speak to that for a moment and let us know what that is and why it's so unique, especially during this global crisis time?
Yeah. So I'll definitely speak to that. A little bit about me. I was born and raised in San Francisco Bay Area in California, and my parents are from Nicaragua. And so the way that I came into Mesoamerican medicine, which I'll get into that in just one moment, is by getting really curious about, okay, so what were people indigenous to Nicaragua practicing before they were colonized? And so on my quest to kind of figure that out, and so that was like over 500 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. I met teachers locally here from Mexico who are practiced and are medicine women in something called curanderismo, which is Mesoamerican medicine. And what that means is that these are traditional medicines from the region of Mexico and Central America that are indigenous technologies and practices of how we can stay healthy from a holistic perspective. So we're going beyond just like thinking about the physical body, and we're really grounding it in mind, body, spirit, emotion, and thinking about like wholeness.
Mm-hmm. So is this form of traditional medicine? I mean, okay, so let me back up a little bit. Mm-hmm. So you were raised in the Bay Area. I actually graduated high school in San Jose, which is in the Bay Area. So.
Oh, neat. Okay.
But you've had this beautiful heritage.
Mm-hmm.
Did you experience any kind of, I mean, I know that it's tricky when you're not raised in, I know the Bay Area is very diverse culturally. So, but there's still that like dominant culture that wants to usurp over every other, right? So what was your experience with that growing up?
Well, I would say, coming from a migrant family, Nicaragua has like very strong ties to Catholicism. And so my parents totally, I think this is what you're talking about, right? So my parents totally sent me to like Catholic Christian schools my whole life. Mm. So I was very much steeped in dominant culture, like patriarchal,
yes.
Religious, just very much like, also my parents like really loved coming to the United States. And so like, they really wanted us to just like assimilate and just really, we love our culture, but they really wanted us to like be quote unquote normal, like just be like everybody else, just do the things you got to do.
And I'm sure they had altruistic intent. Like they just wanted you to be accepted and by your peers and happy. And
yes, totally. And so all of that to just say, like, when I kind of came into this, so I'm thinking about like in my early 20s, which was several years ago now, when I came into this individualistic like path, like straying away from what was normal to them and really everybody around us in our community, and starting on this path of traditional medicine, they were like, well, first I didn't want to tell them. So I was kind of like in the spiritual closet. and then when I started talking about it, they were like, that's interesting. And that scares us.
And we don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, we're not really sure. We're not really sure what we want to, how to go about that. So it's been an interesting dance for sure. I can definitely talk more about it too.
Well, I think, just going with like what's happening with the Disney, even the culture, like, a lot of stuff that we're seeing, the old fairy tales dying of like Cinderella and Here Comes the Prince and Snow White, and now you're seeing Moana, who's like saving her village by leaving what's familiar and going out into the unknown. Same with Frozen. These really strong female leads who are now kind of breaking that old stereotype of waiting around. And this has nothing to do about with men. It's just waiting for anything like your tribe, your culture, your people. You have to leave what's familiar to navigate the waters of, being a voice for the voiceless, or for speaking up for what is your truth.
Yeah.
And that is brave work. So it sounds like at least you had the foundation from your parents of, giving you that in some way, setting the stage for you to be able to have the bravery to do that.
Yeah. I mean, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I do, like, part of the reason why I really feel so strongly and connected to this work is like exactly what it is that you're saying. Like when I watched Moana and the way that she connected to her ancestry, like the way that she connected to her grandmother is.
I literally bawled through that entire thing.
Yeah, me too. I was like, it was very, very special. And like, it is a sort of like remembering of like really actually taking pieces of my soul and my lineage back and integrating that piece of me. So it feels so true that I like really couldn't know anything else. Like I wouldn't be being true to myself if I didn't actually like stand up for this thing that I know to be true, which is like the way I practice. Right. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So with that, you tell us what was your path as you individuated from, sort of what you, I guess, inherited, because you had these two worlds you lived in, where you had this beautiful, like I said, this beautiful Mesoamerican heritage. How did you fully embrace who you are, aside from what you were incarnated into, I should say, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're bringing up, I think, two things that really stand out to me about what you're saying is thinking about the ways in which when I met my mentor and she was telling me like, oh, that thing that you kind of set to the side and you always ignore called your intuition, learning that that's actually my superpower. Like that's actually like some of the deepest ways that we can connect to spirit, some of the deepest ways that I can connect to other realms, other dimensions, other information, remembering technologies from my ancestors, other medicine, other tools. So all of that, like just in this realization of I could really lean into this intuition that I have to open up the ways in which I listen to spirit. So that was one. So that being a practice. So whether that's like the meditative practice or practice in prayer, or a combination of different things, like that was the one thing. And then having it affirmed back to me by my teachers and community. So like, even though my parents weren't necessarily on board, like I had to really seek out like an individual to say like, oh yeah, that thing that you experienced, that's a real thing. Like, that message that you received, that download that you received, that's a real thing. That's like real information.
It's totally valid.
Yeah. So that affirmation felt super important.
Well, let's go into the energy part of it, because I know most people, I feel like if we were to have this conversation 5 years ago, most,
Hmm.
I would say it'd be split. Like some people would understand energy psychology, some people wouldn't, or energy medicine, however you want to put it.
Yeah.
Now we just know it's like basic quantum physics. And so most people, when we're talking about energy or energy work, they have a semblance of idea of what it is. And it's often said like your path finds you, you don't find your path. We've been talking a lot about that the last few weeks in this podcast. So how did this kind of work, this energy work, and all that you're about now, how did it find you? And how would you define it too?
So there came a point in my adulthood where I realized that I am going to break down the oppressive structures that the women in my family had experienced. So I know that sounds kind of, maybe, I don't know, that might sound weird, but at some point I knew like, oh, my grandmother was not happy in her marriage. My other grandmothers weren't happy in their marriage. They didn't really get to live a life that they want. Like they had their contracts, their cords, their vows of poverty, of suffering. And I knew that I'm not going to do that. Like I'm not going to I'm talking about like at a soul level. I'm not even
Right.
talking like, intellectually. It's like something is going to come where I'm going to have an opportunity to speak their truth through my being, like through the way that I live my life. I'm going to be able to like
Mhm.
free them of that like oppressive structure. And that healing gets to happen like this lifetime.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so that's kind of like so that's kind of like the shortened version of like how like something was awakened in me where I knew that that was going to be, but I didn't know how, because I was like, well, I'm not even in a relationship. I'm single. So how's that going to happen? And my relationship pattern at that time I wasn't really happy with it. So I was like, I don't know how this is going to work, but I know that it starts with truth. So I'm going to start there.
So yeah, just getting in, just uncovering the truth as you want to and need to experience. I think truth can be subjective. I think a lot of us would like to believe there is literal, absolute truth. And I think there are universal laws that are applicable. But
Mhm.
I also feel like this is such an individuated process where we need to get to the heart of it for our own being. And it's not a one size fits all, and it's so diverse. So, jumping a bit, because you've mentioned it, you've kind of danced around this, and I think we could get really super clear with it. What kind of tuning into your own inner wisdom,
Mhm.
um, and we didn't really get around to completely, I guess, defining energy,
Mhm.
but I think this is when you're talking about raising your vibration, because know you do a lot of work on this, tuning into your wisdom to raise your vibration, which creates joy, or which creates a heightened
Yeah.
quality of life. So, how would you, let's start first, because we'll get into how to tune into inner wisdom, but let's start first with what is raising your vibration? Like, what does that mean to you?
If you can think about the image of water and the way that sound travels through water and ripples, that's an energy. So,
Mm,
and thinking about like vibrations in our body and energy in our body, all of our thoughts, all of our emotions, all of that felt sense that doesn't necessarily get contacted on a day to day. That's like all part of our energetic body, right? Like you can't see it, but you know it's there.
mhm,
And when it's moving more slowly, thinking about more like depressed states of being. And this is not from a place of value judgment. This is like just saying that this is like a slower moving vibration, a lower vibration of feelings of sadness, of feelings of frustration, of feelings of anger. These are just slower moving vibrations. We're thinking about raising it. How can we move it so it begins to begins to move faster and transmute? So what I mean by transmute is like change the
the patterns or.
Yeah, change the patterns, like accelerate the energy. So we're no longer moving so slowly. We can, uh, yeah, we can just move through it more quickly. So let's see. I'm thinking of like when we are like dancing or like thinking about the sound when it's like a faster beat. Thinking about energy and emotions and thoughts in that way as well. So moving from a
Mhm.
depressed state to maybe a state of more joy, like when you're filled up with that life force energy. Yeah.
Yeah, and the paradox with that is as you slow down, that's when your frequency actually increases. So as you get to still point, surrender, at least
Mhm.
in my experience, and you go within and you access your heart space, your inner, your inner soul space, if you will,
Mhm.
that is what actually starts to raise the frequency and the vibration because you're getting within and you're going down and in and accessing your own embodied wisdom. And so there's this whole like the when you were talking about the patriarchy, that kind of reminds me like the old achievement paradigm of just going and producing and just this linear way of living where it's like, clock in, clock out, so to speak, and you're just go, go, go and produce, 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 mass produce, industrialism and all of that. And now it's like, oh, how do we take a step back? Because it's just very chaotic what's
Mhm.
been created. To me, that's what the virus is one of the invitations of the virus. When you look beyond the surface of it, the gift side of it is, we're all sort of given this universal invitation to just kind of take a time out, to stop and go within, and that will actually raise the vibration of the planet if we're not in a fear response.
Right. Yeah. To me, I love what it is that you're saying, and really the way that I'm experiencing the virus personally, but then also in community is absolutely uh, to an opportunity to sit in stillness and an acceptance. You're really like allowing whatever is coming as part of our human experience. And we do experience these like really difficult and challenging emotions at times. They feel so big and they feel so immense because we're working through like lifetimes of chords and stories and vows that it is that are coming up right now that we get to sit with because we're not working, because we're home. We don't have necessarily the same type of contact, physically at least, that we have had in the past. So we really don't have um, the type of distractions that it was that we could really utilize before, in order to kind of like titrate how we sit with these more challenging emotions. And we're really being asked to, hey, look at this. If you really want to do like the work of what your purpose is, hey, like take a look at this. And we are really being asked to raise it, like transmute it, like because we all have the ability to do that.
All right. So, what are your best practices for this, for actually climbing in and tuning in and really raising that vibration, this
Mhm.
process?
Awareness. And the reason why I say awareness is because awareness and acceptance. Um, And this is kind of a tough one because of what it is that you mentioned, because of the way that our society is structured, to kind of like disembody us from this experience because we're being asked to produce at such a high pace. But when we slow down, so that's kind of like the precursor, I guess. It's like really slowing down, like you said, and just being aware that there is an experience underneath what some of the things that we may be feeling. Um, because a lot of folks are feeling anxious, or a lot of folks are feeling maybe even depressed, but there is other feelings in there. So we're being asked to be aware of fear. We're being asked to be aware of our loneliness. We're being asked to be aware of our sadness and our grief.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and two, contacting it in a way that like really sitting with it without necessarily um, pushing an outcome.
Mm.
Because often I, we, my clients want to say, okay, like I'm sad, but I want to get rid of this sad feeling. But what we do when we try to push something aside, as I'm sure you know, and a lot of your listeners know, like it doesn't actually go away. It just like moves to a different part of our
Right.
consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really being able to attune to, well, what is it that I'm really like asking for? What do I need right now? To really say, like, hey, inner Claudia, you're sad. Okay, like you can be sad.
It is what it is.
Yeah, like accepting that I'm a human and I'm sad. So I have this sad experience. So I can really go all the way into it, because that is when we can actually begin to move it out of us. Like just
Mm-hmm.
accepting that it's actually there, and then doing the ritual work in the way that feels it uh, good for you, aligned for you, and intuitively the way that you're being called to do that work, to be able to let it go,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to truly let it go. And that's really like the transmutation of the deeper fear, sadness, loneliness, grief energy.
Yes. And I think a lot of us who are more empathic, who have the tendency to take on the energy of what's going on around us,
Mm-hmm.
for people who are really, really sensitive that way, they're going to take on the pain of everyone right now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
not just those that are like directly in their sphere, but people who they're just going to feel it for humanity. They're just going to feel that burden. Um, and I'm reading between the lines here, but I'm assuming you're one of those people who are just very sensitive energetically, which is why you do the work you do with, your holistic work and, even your background in the Mesoamerican traditional medicine. There's just this like collective holding our breath right now. And it's interesting that the virus is lung based. It's
Mm-hmm.
respiratory.
Yeah.
Yes. So how would you, let's just say you have a person who has been impacted. I personally have not been impacted by the virus. I don't know anyone personally that's contracted it. We don't live in a high density area that has had a lot of cases. Um, and so I haven't been personally impacted, I would say, to the extent that I've lost someone or someone I know is really suffering or it's really affected my livelihood. I've actually had almost an opposite effect, knock on wood, where I've experienced more of an exponential, like hungering to get my message out and help people heal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what would you say to someone who is experiencing some upheaval and some chaos in this time?
Yeah. So for in this case, what also feels like really clear to me that the virus is also kind of bringing is the importance of connecting to a loving and supportive community. So um, because we are being physically isolated or physically distancing, we're being asked as humans to remember how we can stay connected, emotionally, energetically, in ways that feel good to us. So we're
Mm,
really being asked to take a look at that. And so I wouldn't necessarily say this like in this term, but if somebody comes to me like as a client and saying like, I'm really struggling, I'm really having a hard time, I lost someone, I have somebody who's sick, I myself am sick, I am going to come in with that like heart medicine and make sure that they are feeling held from that place of, if they don't feel like they can take care of themselves, then I'm going to give them tools as well as heart medicine from me, because I am holding them energetically.
that's
And then making
beautiful.
sure that they feel held in their space, and making sure that their space is not only physically clean but energetically clean, and making sure community surrounds them to make sure that they're getting herbal medicine and energetic medicine that it is that they need. So that's just where to start.
So yeah, so if somebody doesn't have that, let's just say that they're feeling super lonely and they need to generate their own heart medicine. What
Mhm.
kind of tips would you offer there?
Yeah, I love that you asked that, because that is definitely a true thing that can happen, especially as like we're starting off on our journey. We haven't had a chance to build our like solid community foundation, or like maybe we're isolated from our family members, or maybe we just don't have those type of relationships, and that's like a reality. And
Mhm.
so my support around that would be to call on your benevolent ancestors to connect to the elements that our environment offers us. And what I mean by that is asking, um, and with intention and with gratitude, asking the sun to provide that warmth, that heart medicine,
Mm,
to open up our heart, to invite the elements of the earth to come in and remind us that we're not alone. Connecting
mm,
to sun, connecting to earth, connecting to air, connecting to water, because those elements surround us all the time. And if we can't get outside, then biting down that size even more and saying, okay, can you stand in your window and just let the sun warm you up? Can you warm up some water and just let that water warm you up from the inside? Can you take a hot shower, or can you have some chocolate to open up that heart space? So
mm.
that kind of stuff, to remember that
Beautiful.
that's always there for us. Mhm.
Before this hit, I would, I think you're episode 70 something, but most of my episodes, I've interviewed people. I've only done like a handful of solo episodes, but almost everyone that I've interviewed, and I would include you in this definitely because you just spoke to it. When I ask them their tips or what they would do to go within, almost unequivocally across the board, they say something about going out in nature.
Mhm.
We've really gotten away from that. With the oil and gas, I was asking my husband to get, I'm like, I don't get it. Why are the oil and gas prices so low? And just in me, like not being really like clicked into like current events. And he's like, well, people are driving less. People are using less fuel. There's, businesses, factories aren't working at capacity, all these things.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, and with that said, like it is that is part of the deeper invitation of like how how do we how do we come back into the place where we're going into nature more, and mother nature is saying, yes, I'm taking a little time out here, I'm taking a respite. And how does she, mother earth, model to us how to do that, even if there isn't a pandemic? Of course, we're forced into it now, like taking a time out. But even if there wasn't, how do we move forward from here and really come back into the space of letting nature be our first go to rather than the alternative
Yeah.
that we've been programmed in this age to see it as?
It you really like made me just think of like the day and night. Like sun and moon and earth, like they have this just beautiful way of just reminding us every single day that every morning the sun rises, every night the sun sets, and we go into darkness and then we come into the light. Like it's just really taking the cues from even the seasons. Like everything comes to an end, and that is when we take rest. And then in the spring, things are reborn, and then in the summer, we harvest. Like the signs are really just everywhere in terms of like how to um, look out and then say, oh, that's a natural rhythm of how Mother Earth does it. Like I have those rhythms in myself. Like when I'm feeling my ebb and flow, when I have my own, when is my energy higher? When is my energy lower? Like, how can I just honor that as a process instead of trying to kind of like fit it into
Mhm.
this, what you were saying, like instead of trying to fit it into this like old system that just says be on all the time.
Yeah, yeah, just being at peak performance all the time. It's just so unrealistic and such a burnout. And the moon waxes and wanes. And that's what our bodies want to do.
Hmm.
There are seasons, like you said, summer, fall, winter, spring. We're heading into spring. So it's time for new life. It's time for regeneration.
Hmm.
I'm looking out my window right now, and the buds on my tree by my office window are just in full glory. They won't be this way. They won't look this green forever. Like I'm thinking, what is nature telling me right now for me? And it's not just about what can I produce or what
Yes,
can I show? It's what's happening in my body. What am I coming back to, or what am I regenerating? Or what am I letting go of?
exactly. Yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So let's kind of pull this together with just some of your, I guess, I don't want to say tips because that sort of trivializes it or reduces your work. But I know that kind of what I've felt to go with this whole thing is just the power of sitting with yourself. As we've been talking, it just feels like that's the vibe of this, is how we come back to center, how we come back to what's essential, how we sit with what is. And you talked about how the first opener to that is just acceptance. So let's break that down just a bit and then we'll kind of wrap up. How do you do that? For the practical left brain people like me, I flip in and out of right and left brain. So I'm like, but like, what is the key to just coming into accepting what the reality is, what's showing up? Like, how do you get to acceptance?
Noticing just whatever is true, because I think what happens is that what I think that you might be getting at is that, like, sometimes we have resistance to accepting, right? Like, naturally.
Oh, absolutely. We always do.
Yeah. And so if that's where you're at, that's where you're at. Like, there's no wrong way to have an unfolding of your process. Like, your process is exactly where you need it to be. And I'll say that has been a difficult one for me to accept as well. So I go back and forth, and the back and forth, the meandering, if you will, is the way. I'm holding it as, okay, sometimes I'm going to feel like I don't want to feel those things. So today that's going to be true, or this week or this month or whatever is the case for me or anybody else. Like, that's just going to be part of my process. That's where I'm at right now. And that's fine. That's absolutely acceptable.
Yeah. And I think maybe the answer to all of this is just what we were saying. You are going to come into acceptance when you see nature modeling it. And like, for me, it's getting out of what I think the outcome needs to be. And I think you alluded to that before when we were in the course of our discussion. You just detach from what you think it needs to look like. And just letting it be what it is. Like like you're saying, if you're mad, be mad. If you're sad, be sad. If you're, I guess maybe another part to this question is, what's the reframe? How do you not stay stuck in all the stress? Because the stress is what it is. The whole globe is under a stress response. How do you sort of stay in your domain and stay aligned in that acceptance part? And I love that you take time to access it, instead of just rattling off a response, because
I think your question is so important, because we are in the middle of this push and pull. I take it it's very serious. And to me, what comes up is practicing and recognizing what is mine and what is not mine. Like, in terms of this anxiety, is it mine, or is it like somebody else that I just talked to? Is it when I go out and realizing, oh, I'm picking up other people's energies of fear? And then when I can really clear those fears out, like, okay, so what am I truly afraid of? Like, what is my stress response about? What is it that I'm looking to produce or move forward? Like, where are the places that I'm feeling stagnated? So that really feels important, because we do get pulled, or we do absorb energies. Like, I'm absolutely, like you said, one of them. So understanding that not all of it is mine, because the energy is so intense. It's so intense that it literally feels thick when you walk outside in San Francisco. Like,
I'm sure. Are you like right in the city, or?
Oh yeah.
Really?
I'm in San Francisco proper. Yeah. And every time I go outside, I'm like, whoa. So I use, the tools that it is that I need to use, whether that's, folks do their like white bubble meditation, or their golden light meditation, or like the intention behind like wrapping your head or covering yourself. So doing the tools that it is that I need, and then cleansing when I get home, because I know I'm not going to hold these energies, because they don't serve me, I'm going to send them back with love and light. So that's
Mm.
one. And then the stuff that's coming from in me and my lifetimes, like that is other things I have to work on releasing. Right. So that's what comes.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really, I think we're coming back to what's simple. It feels that way, right? Does it feel that way to you that we're just coming back into like simple stuff like nature and breath and uh, just like you? I loved what you were saying about calling on your beloved ancestors. How do you do that?
I say it out loud. I say, like, I call on my beloved ancestors. I invite you to this space. I ask that you help me. I ask that you support me. I always invite them when I'm praying. I invite them when I feel fear and worry. Like I invite them and I ask them, like I ask them to visit me in my dreams, like all the time, especially now. Can you come help me, please? Because I need it. We can't do it alone.
No, 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 no way.
Yeah.
We are actually at our root one. We are all one.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lie that we're separate. It's an illusion that we're separate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I love that you just call it out. It really, I mean, I don't think that there's like a scientific process for that. I think it's very intuitive, don't you? Just however you feel aligned with that. I found, I don't know where I first heard this, but there's a poem called The Grandmothers. And the suggested practice from the person who brought it to me was that you write down, I am Cherie, daughter of blank, daughter of blank, daughter of blank, all the way 7 generations back.
Mm-hmm.
So I got out my genealogy sheet and I looked to see, because I only knew up to my great grandmother. I couldn't remember my great great grandmother or her mother. And I felt so much emotion
Mm-hmm.
doing that. And I was like, all I have to do is speak their name, and the energy of that brings them to me.
Yes.
And so I was like, it was one thing to write it down, but when I said it,
Yeah.
I was like, oh boy, like all the hair on my head stood up.
Yep.
A chill went down my spine in a good way, not a creepy way.
Yeah. That sounds really beautiful.
Because I had I think that my grandmother's name and her mother's name are kind of weird. They're like old lady names, I'm being honest. But then the further that I went back, I was like, there's some really gorgeous energy with these names, Sarah and Elizabeth. And it reminded me of just like a Jane Austen novel or something. And,
Mm.
that's my Western European heritage. That's my DNA. And just saying it just brought it home. It just felt like there was a gathering. Um,
Mhm.
uh, and I think it's akin to prayer in the sense that you are calling and you're petitioning and you're bringing it in, not like that's a praise or worship thing as much as it is just, hey, I need a team. I need team support here.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, thinking about too, like what you're saying and the power of your words. I mean, I don't know if have you read the Four Agreements?
Yes. Don
And
Miguel Ruiz. Yeah.
yes, and just thinking about that idea of being impeccable with your word, like, because how much power do our words have? We're literally taking that the frequency of thought, and then we're putting it, and we're actually making that into sound. Like we really are calling it forth, and we're manifesting anything that it is that we say. We're such powerful beings.
Yes.
And so to be able to call out your ancestors by name, just wow, it
Hmm.
makes sense that your hair on your head would stand up.
Yeah, just being a woman of your word. I thank you for reminding me of the Four Agreements, because that's such a classic work of it's just so simple in theory, and I think we overcomplicate things, and it dilutes our personal power.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I've loved the direction we've gone here. Is there anything that you would add that we haven't hit on yet that you feel like is important to note at this point?
Hmm. Yeah. I think I have a thought around what it was that you just said, and this idea of like overcomplicating, and how that like our self-doubt really gets in the way of our personal power, of like that deeper spiritual and energetic power that it is that we carry. So the more that we're leaning into that intuition and that trust in ourselves, like the
Mhm.
more we get to grow that in that way, on that path.
Mm,
Mm.
love it. Well, Claudia, this has been a beautiful discussion. I would encourage people to find you. Will you share the web address of your work?
Yeah, absolutely. It's claudiaparadaenergy.com. So it's my name and then PARADA energy.com.
It's a beautiful website. I'm looking at it right now.
Thank
It's very
you.
inviting. It's got a high vibe to it. So yes, everyone can find her there, and we would encourage you to continue to just go within and listen to your truth, and know that the answers that you seek are seeking you, and they will find you. Thank you so much, Claudia, for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening, and remember, you can always call on the other side. You're never alone. You can always call out to your beloved ancestors, and I love how she talked about just connecting to the elements of nature, coming into the flow of what feels natural for you to connect, no matter what other people think. And we really do need to detach from other people's energies. It keeps us from getting into too much of a stress fear response when we answer the call of our own heart and what feels natural to us. It also attunes us to our inner wisdom when we can let go and detach from the opinions of others with the intent to love instead of fear, which is a lifelong process. We're all learning. Thanks for listening this week, and remember to go to Women Seeking Wholeness on Facebook and join our discussion there. Thank you for listening, and have a blessed week.